Ahoy there, mateys! 'Tis I, your Captain Kia, here to take you on a voyage to see how the book Built Through Courage by Dave Hollis makes me want to walk the plank. Dave Hollis? More like Davy Jones, am I right? Is that too far? So I'm sure that some of you already know what I think about Dave Hollis, hence the videos that I've already made. But for those who may be new, allow me to catch you up just very quickly. Dave Hollis was once married to self-help guru Rachel Hollis, but you know, shit happens. Now he's got a podcast, does some coaching, and this is his second book. His first was a New York Times bestseller called Get Out of Your Own Way. But aboard today's video, we will be discussing Captain Dave's second and non-best-selling book, at least as of now, Built Through Privilege. I've already made that joke. Built Through Boredom. Okay, wait, no, that was my experience. The book is actually called Built Through Courage. This book touches on Dave's decision to leave the Walt Disney Company, which created riveting and relatable headlines like this. Former Disney exec turned self-help author, my job wasn't that hard. Also in the book, Dave talks about his divorce from Rachel, and he talks pretty politely about her, but we all really know it was quite an ordeal. So if you're ready, tie down the hatches and let's go! So before we dive into this 210-page nautical nightmare, let's talk about the formatting. This is specific to the written version. The book was also available on audio and Kindle, so if you're a book listener as opposed to a book reader, you may not care about this as much, but in my opinion, the drawings and charts throughout the book were unnecessary in almost every instance that they were used. The images are themselves just drawn cartoons of actual photos that he's posted on his Instagram, which to me brings nothing new to the chapter or in understanding Dave himself. Also, this picture in particular is kind of cringy because it shows Dave's friend, Brady, who apparently he had a quote, bromance of the millennium with, but now, according to kind of like Instagram and rumors, the two don't even have a relationship anymore, so why he deserved an image in this book, who knows. Moving on. This map. This map is supposed to be the guiding organizational force of this whole book, and it's just confusing. I always leave room in any critique that it may just be me that's stupid, but I have no idea how this is supposed to be utilized and why the words he chose were chosen and what they have to do with each other. For example, the first lighthouse is labeled 1.1 letting go. I'm not sure why it's 1.1 and not 1. Can someone in the comments please take a wild guess? Wrong answers only. The first buoy with the flag is labeled 1.2 belief. 1.3 is clarity, goes on, you get the picture. Then the second lighthouse is 2.1 principles, and the only buoy in that grouping is boundaries 2.2. So what does a buoy mean on this map? And I guess buoys can live alone, they don't have to relate to each other. Like, I'm confused if leverage has anything to do with calling because the flags are not facing each other, but then why is principles a lighthouse? I just wish he included a legend that explained the symbols in any detail so I could follow the structure without having to guess so much. The second thing about the map is that it has additional labeling that is literally and figuratively all over the place. Your calling, your identity, your experiences, owning where you are. It seems random and not really something that added much value for me. Then the big labels of knowing where you are, owning where you are, prepares you for where you're going. This is nearly the exact same concept that Rachel Hollis uses for her Rise conference. Day 1 is your past, day 2 is your present, and day 3 is your future. It also looks like it's a pirate's map given the X marks the spot at the end, but if that's the case, what's the booty? And no, Heidi Powell, I'm not talking about you. There is also so much wasted space in this book. It seems like Dave may have had a page goal and he just added as much fluff as possible to get there. Even the journal prompts at the end felt like an attempt to take up more space on the page. Most of the prompts were just regurgitated questions already asked of the reader in the chapter. And speaking of chapters, I was confused as to when I was entering a new chapter. Is this a new chapter or is this a new chapter? He said there were 45 total chapters, so let me consult my map. I don't know, I'm sunk. If you can't tell by the book's cover, this whole book is filled with seafaring metaphors as an homage to Dave's own hard-to-read quote tattoo. A spip and barber is safe, but Tibats, not Wabat, spips are built for. He says in the book he got the tattoo because, quote, it is my mantra, a constant reminder that the life I want exists outside of my comfort zone. All right, fair enough. But that's where his direct interest or passion or knowledge about boating begins and ends. In fact, he says, quote, I'm not good on boats. I've never loved the open water and I tend to get seasick. It may seem funny that someone who dislikes boats would have a quote about ships tattooed on their arm or would choose to write a book with a nautical theme, and yet I've done this in the name of challenging my comfort zone. I think it's just plain weird. It would have been cool if he was challenging himself by sailing around the world and then wrote a book about it, but to literally not have interest in something and then write a self-help book using imagery of that thing, it comes off as disingenuous and just odd. I think, personally, he should have used running as an analogy instead for a few reasons. First, Dave said that running was a limiting belief for him before.
I came into the idea of pushing myself physically with some limiting beliefs around what was possible for someone with my frame. That I'm too tall to run was a story that had been told to me for years and years of my life. I didn't run a single mile until I was 36 years old.
Whoa.
One single mile. And in this last year, I've run 1,000 miles.
In the book, Dave also talks about how running became his coping mechanism after the divorce, and that he's logged thousands of miles in the last couple of years. Now that's something he's actually accomplished and has knowledge about. He could have pretty easily replaced cliche quotes like, we're all victims of a harbor in which we find ourselves anchored, to something like, we're all victims of standing at the starting line of a race we're afraid to run. Or, you can't sail the ocean with someone else's map, which is not only not how maps work, but you could have also said, you can't run a race at someone else's pace because maybe your finish lines are different. That's just my 2 cents, of course, but I would have respected him more if he used some analogies of something he actually understands. Again, I'm not against using metaphors in books, but just ones that are not related to the author, overused, and don't actually make sense. That's where I start to go overboard. Dave is what I like to call celebrity adjacent. His social media following is more than the guy sitting next to you at Starbucks, but let's be honest, Google always knows best, and he's sort of known as the ex-husband of that Christian girl boss lady. Not quite paparazzi status. But because he's writing a self-help book, I think he thought it was a good idea to name drop a few actual celebrity names to make it seem like he runs in some powerful circles. However, in this case, I thought it came off as tacky and unuseful. None of the celebrities he named seemed to be accompanied by stories that were meaningful or funny or really had a good point. For example, Dave talked about during his time at Disney, he gave notes to Steven Spielberg over the phone about a scene in the movie he directed, War Horse. Quote, you know there's that sequence where the shot is beautifully capturing the deserters fleeing through a sweeping windmill before you hear the gunshots and they fall dead? I just wonder if that being in the film doesn't make it harder for us to sell this to families at Christmas when the picture comes out. Without missing a beat, he said, quote, you know, Dave, when I made E.T., I was on the talk show circuit promoting the opening, and I was asked by an interviewer why in the world I had Elliot say the words penis breath in the dinner sequence. Why would I do that to a family movie? And the answer was simple. I left it in because that's what happens at family dinner tables. And while I appreciate your question, I'll be leaving the sequence of the deserting troops being shot as they fled because that's what happens in war. I guess the point of the story is to shut your mouth when talking to important people, or get so good at something that you don't have to take a guy like Dave's advice. But either way, I think he just wanted people to know that he talked to Steven Spielberg on the phone. And if that's the point of the story, cool, but not really helping me as a person reading this book. Dave also mentions randomly meeting Dan Rather on a plane, which also warranted an illustration apparently. He also talks about helping Destiny's Child perform at malls before they were super famous. Another unnecessary illustration included. And finally, this one is to me an obvious fuck you to Rachel, who loves him.
Oh, we should flash back to the time that my future best friend, The Rock,
sent me his tequila. I've already like seen the vision of the future where like our families go on vacation together and my kids call him Uncle DJ, and it's like fine because we're best friends.
Dave talked about The Rock, or should I say DJ. Surprisingly, there was no drawing of him though. Overall, these stories just seemed again like fluff and are more appropriate to mention at a boring dinner party than in a book that Dave claims
100%, it'll change your life. It will change your life. Will it really change my life, Dave? Yes.
If you follow Dave Hollis on social media and then read this book, you may be very confused at times because it seems like a lot of the advice that he shares, is not followed by him. On page 12, he says, quote, "The world around you runs on noise, never-ending marketing from companies trying to convince you of what you desperately need," including him and his girlfriend Heidi, who try to convince their hundreds of thousands of followers that they need to lose weight by drinking shakes and whiten their teeth and swallow supplements to keep their brain working. It's not that advice that he's giving in the book, it's just hypocritical that he himself is one of those marketers and doesn't just own it. Again, on page 50, he says, quote, "The kids are watching us, watching what we do and absorbing it as programming for how they should be in the world." That's rich, because we all remember this fiasco, right?
Do you understand that when you ask like this in front of our friends on the internet, they think that I am a terrible person when I don't jump up immediately? This is why, you guys are like, yo, just go spend time. Oh, go spend time with this? I'm gonna let you parent your kids, brother. I'm gonna go ahead and parent mine. I love you enough to say no, this is a boundary, get a life.
This part really grinds my gears because Dave talks about the haters more than any other influencer I know.
Go ahead and raise your middle finger at me. I don't even care about you, middle finger guy, today. You know why? Because it doesn't bother me today. Now you're blocked forever. Like literally forever, you're gone. I was gonna teach you something this morning, and now, middle finger guy, you're gone. You know what you need? You need this book, $18.
Okay, maybe Hilaria Baldwin is a close second, but seriously, Dave hates haters. So it's odd for him to give this advice on page 117. Quote, "Pursuing a life of impact means accepting a journey of criticism. People not liking your work, even hating it, that's the price of entry." He desperately needs to reread this chapter and take notes. You've made it to the part that I actually liked. And I think a lot of people will think this is really random, but whatever, this is my review, so deal with it. On page 160, Dave talks about a project he was given while at Disney to sell something called Easy Discs. Apparently, it was a technology that allowed videos to be on DVD temporarily, so you could rent it, but then you could throw it away after a few days because it would just stop working after a certain amount of time. The project obviously didn't succeed long term, but of course, Dave wouldn't put this in the book if there wasn't a condescending final thought. He says, quote, "A good idea that consumers weren't ready for." Okay, Dave, that's why the project failed. But I still did learn something nonetheless. There are a lot of other things that I could have pointed out in this book, but literally I think I will be seasick if I talk about this any longer, so just want to say that this book did not hit any major bestseller lists, and I imagine it will stay that way. Unfortunately, Dave isn't giving up on the idea of being an author, however. He wrote a children's book about the exploitation of his daughter. He wrote a book about tea time that he has with his daughter Noah. In reality, tea time to Dave means he's too busy to actually wait for tea to steep, so he just cracks open a LaCroix and yells nonsense at Noah for 15 minutes.
You have to be your biggest cheerleader. This is a cardigan.
Cardigan?
It's called a cardigan.
This Tea Time with Noah book was originally scheduled to come out in February, but now has been pushed back to May, according to Amazon. And there's a lot to say about this book as well, including why Noah looks white, and why Dave feels the need to use his children to earn money in the first place. But that's for a different video. That's it for this video. Thank you to my patrons over on Patreon. Sorry I've been a little MIA this month. I've been trying to finish up a lot of work on my non-YouTube video production business, but there are some cool things coming down the pipeline that I think you'll enjoy and should pick up the pace with more videos more often. Stay tuned. Anyways, ta-ta, and a reminder that merch is coming. We are so close to that 10K subscriber mark. So if you have not subscribed, please subscribe. Comment what you thought about the book if you read it. Comment what you thought about the review and about this new different setup. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye.